My name is Auren Hoffman, CEO of SafeGraph. We're based in San Francisco. We sell location data.
Hello everyone, Monica Ho. I'm the CMO of GroundTruth, formerly known as XAD. For those of you unfamiliar with the name, we are a global technology company that's really focused on driving offline performance in the manner of offline visits and sales. And we do that by using location as the ultimate source of intent. And I've been with the company about 6 years.
Hi everyone, I'm Rob Jonas. I'm the head of revenue for Factual. We're based in LA, although I'm not originally from LA. We are a mobile location data company. We build data around points of interest, which we license to hundreds of entities around the world. We also understand location data from hundreds of millions of devices, which we use for targeting for advertisers and location insights for enterprises.
Cool, thank you. So as you guys can tell, we started with some small fish and some small players to kick this off. It's super exciting. So a few weeks back, I wrote something that I had been thinking about that Street Fright published, which was really kind of the orientation of location data and the evolution of location data. And really kind of the macro piece was that location started very much off around audiences and retargeting, look-back retargeting, people that walked into a QSR or a restaurant, and agencies could use that data to enhance their campaigns, obviously, through performance. And obviously, XAD's been a player in that space early days. Place IQ and others, of course, Factual, GroundTruth. Thank you. But as the space has kind of evolved and kind of even thinking from a lens from Unacast, we started seeing more appetite and interest in regards to visit data. In some cases raw, but visits meaning understanding that where somebody was in the physical world, like were they actually in a Starbucks or near a Starbucks. So this is more of a raw ingredient. And the purposes of that we've seen has been used everything from attribution, verification, and data modeling. So in this case, to be clear, this is less about parking data and segments for third parties to use for classic ad buying. This would be more about, no. Rather than buying the bread on the shelf, I want the ingredients to make my own bread because I have data scientists, I have analytical people, and this is how I want it. And it's a big part of where Unacast is going, but that's not about why we're on stage, about as far as what our plans are. So that was the piece. It seemed to get good traction. GroundTruth retweeted it. Thank you. That was the only one. So I wanted to kick off with that. Thank you for that laughter. And just start off, quite frankly, do you guys, or this is the one time I'll go kind of down the row, do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you see it both ways? Is there a right or wrong? And then I think more specifically, and probably what a lot of people understand is, from a SafeGraph perspective, what are you guys doing? Because it's obviously there's so much you can understand from the surface or you read about. And should I pass this microphone to Auren? Is that good crowd participation, or can you guys hear him?
I think we're good.
Oh, you're mic'd. Okay,
we're all
good.
mic'd. Yeah.
Cool.
Certainly there's the raw data, so raw lat-long data, and some people can use that and buy that well. So a company like XAD has a lot of capabilities. They could use that data, and they're experts at taking raw lat-long data and then putting that into place. Most companies can't do that. So a small number of companies could use that well, but for most companies, they need data about, they want to know, okay, is it a Starbucks, or is this person commuting on the Metro North, or are they going to a park, or are they at home, or are they at work, et cetera. And that more refined data is probably more valuable for most people, but for some people, the raw data is going to be really, really helpful.
So fair to say, just quickly, like more sophisticated companies will be okay with that format as far as visits and raw, but maybe those that are not.
I wouldn't say sophisticated, because like a hedge fund, for instance, is extremely sophisticated, but probably can't take the raw data. So, but a company that's a location-enabled sophisticated company like GroundTruth, which is a super sophisticated but location-enabled company, they're able to process that raw data. Can be good.
Great. Monica?
So I completely agree. I think the whole reason why our company just rebranded. So we were XAD about 3 months ago. We just recently rebranded to GroundTruth, and that was to signify an evolution of not only the industry and where location data is going, but where our company is going as well. And I think what Chris had mentioned about the evolution of data usage, it's absolutely happening. As a company, we're very focused on media and targeting for about 6, 7 years, that's all we did. And our evolution has been now to step into the data realm, and in a big way. And the reason why is because marketers and people outside of marketing are very interested in the data. So hedge funds were mentioned, using visitation data as a way to determine business health. Marketers using it as a way not just to place media, but to really understand where their visits are coming from, how to better place all kinds of media, and how to better message their audiences sequentially. So I firmly believe that we're on to stage 2.0, and hopefully we'll get into a lot more deep topics around that today.
Yeah, I'd love to find something to disagree with, but I can't. We completely agree. I think probably just to add to the other 2 points, what we find is that obviously the appetite for location data in the broadest sense is enormous, whether it's a marketer or an enterprise. It's very much a hot topic right now, which is why we're all here. But the gap between what an organization wants to do with the data and what they can realistically do with the data is very large. So a typical scenario for us is a customer will say to us, just send us everything you've got. And we turn on that fire hose a little bit, and they kind of go, whoa, that's way too much, and we don't really know what to do with it. So what we've found is the discussion is starting to evolve around, okay, fine, location data is a very valuable input and a signal, but tell us what you want to achieve by using it. Help you make that data useful and valuable for you, as opposed to just bulk sending you a whole lot of information which may or may not make sense to you. And I think that's in relation to the sophistication of the customers and whether or not they can really make sense out of this vast amount of data that we all see.
Where do each of you, and anyone can take this, do you see the market heading as far as where the dollars are coming from? Obviously, it seems as though the low-hanging fruit is the MarTech, ad tech brands. There's also, I think a lot of companies will sort of tout the hedge funds and financial markets, city planning. I think the question that a lot of people understand, is that real? Is that there today? I'd say that Foursquare was probably one of the earliest in regards to making some headway in that market, if I'm not mistaken. But any of you guys can take this in regards to your company today, or is there a strategy that you're going to look at some area or vertical today and then you're going to move into hedge funds tomorrow? Does that require different product or spec work to actually enhance your data set to be able to sell? But more importantly, what markets are most valuable that your teams are focused on today versus tomorrow? And tomorrow could be next quarter, it could be early next year.
So I could speak to this just because we're kind of going through this strategy right now. We are seeing not just hedge funds, but even city planning groups or even retailers as a very big market for our data. We have several clients that are actually using it now. I think what's really important, though, about using this location data set and visitation is that right now in the industry, there's no standardization in terms of who's actually grading the quality of everyone's data set. Because everyone claims that they have the data, it's accurate, it's the most accurate you're gonna get, and guess what? I've got the largest scale. Everybody will tell you that. But who's grading it so that you know what you're buying, you can actually use for things like business health, or be able to model it in small DMAs or small regions, not just nationally. And so I think where this space needs to evolve to really get some of these dollars in is there's got to be some standardization around the quality of data, how that data is verified. I know that, I chair the location accuracy group for the Mobile Marketing Association, and we've been working very closely with the MRC. The location-based measurement guidance just launched, and they're now rolling into some accuracy, early accuracy pre-audits with the MRC. So hopefully that's coming, but I do think that's required before we really open this up to some of these other audiences.
Cool, Rob. Yeah, Rob?
Yeah, the analog for us is we've been licensing point of interest data for 6-7 years now, and we've seen the evolution of that business quite dramatically. So obvious categories were quickly into that data set, and now we've seen more and more advanced and very unique use cases as we move through different verticals. We think the device level data will play out in the same way. There'll be obvious categories which start early. So everybody talks about hedge funds, everybody talks about retailers. I think we're always surprised by the types of organization which are interested in this data. They may not be ready for it, but they understand there's value for it. And I think it will quickly move out of those two categories which are talked about a lot into some very unique and interesting use cases.
There's a kind of a continuum of these businesses. So on the one side, you have these pure data businesses that only sell data. And then you have on the other side, you have these applications that take data and then add a lot of value. The data, so we're on the pure data side. A business, I guess, like GroundTruth might be more on the application side. The application businesses are the ones that really add a lot of value to that data. They make that data sing. The pure data companies like us, we've lowered our prices every month. So our goal is to have the best data at the super low price. And we can only sell to the very sophisticated company. We basically sell to the applications who can then use the data. But most companies can't buy from the pure data companies because they don't have the sophistication to go buy from the pure data. So the pure data companies, in some ways, fund the applications who then add to that and add value in their specific vertical.
So, I mean, maybe a decent segue, as we've seen in the last 20 years, whether it's, the rich media cycle to display to video, there's always this sort of there's always sort of this hype, this push into market, players begin to evolve and gain market share. So it's kind of like two-part question, and anyone can take this. Why now? Like, why is location so important today versus a couple years ago, when maybe Factual started, or as far back as I think the market's caught up to maybe what Foursquare was thinking about? By the way, I keep looking at PK back there in case you guys want to know why I'm looking in that direction. So let's start with that. Like, why is there so much appetite today for this conversation? Is it a result of the app ecosystem? Is that marketers are more sophisticated? Is it the fact that we've had online data, we've had transactional, and then perhaps the obvious ingredients is offline? Auren, do you want to take
Sure.
a step?
The market isn't that big today. The market today for location data is really, really, really small. It's very, very, very tiny. It's growing, but it's really, really, really small. And the dollars per location data has been going down every month. We're a part of that, driving that down, but it is going down. So it's partially also not growing as fast dollar-wise because the prices are going down. But there's all these new use cases that are happening. So one of our biggest markets is self-driving car companies. And so,
Or as your customers?
Yeah, one of our
clients.
biggest clients are self-driving car companies. Those didn't even exist a few years ago. Now they need all this data about where humans go, how humans act in the physical world, et cetera. A few years there weren't those. There's like 38 self-driving car companies today. 4 or 5 years ago, there was maybe 1 or 2.
And in that particular case, they'd be using your data as sort of an additive layer on top of what they have?
Yeah, they need to model what humans do so they don't hit a human or hurt a human, or they need to understand they're for a long time they're going to be interacting with humans, maybe forever, and they need to understand and model out what humans do so that they can be as safe as possible.
Great.
What I would say is that I think why there's so much interest now. I mean, if you look at the online, it's like a 500 billion market. Offline's 4 trillion, huge. I think the data nor the technology was there before to actually get the type of data we now have access to and to be able to interpret it in the ways that we now can. I mean, if you even look at the smartphone device where a lot of this data is coming from, I mean, GPS is getting better and better. The signals are getting better and better. And so we're finally there, that there's a lot of reality in right person, right place, right time marketing, where honestly, a couple of years ago, it wasn't that easy. That's why a couple of years ago, proximity only was what you could do. Now, the more sophisticated audience segments, using this as business health, being able to model the data, those things are actually possible.
So the use cases have expanded dramatically. I mean,
Based on the
I'm sure there's a
data.
lot of people here surprised to hear about, in a favorable way self-driving cars versus what Coca-Cola wants, for example.
Right.
So that's great. Rob?
Yeah, I mean, obvious point is it's very front of mind just because of raw consumption, right? There's just more data coming off of mobile devices. And what we'll start to see in the coming years is more location signal coming off of non-mobile devices, right? And that's really going to when it's going to explode. So it's just very front of mind for everybody that data is out there, people are using their devices, it's very powerful, and the data sets are available.
Monica, you brought up something earlier which I think is important and something that maybe drives the winner out of this very interesting race, if there is one or two, is around transparency. And kind of to my earlier point, there's always kind of a market evolution where there is some black box thinking didn't work out very well for, the rocket fuels of the world and others that weren't disclosing kind of how things arise. So as it relates to this space, and maybe Auren, to your earlier point, is the market being held back because of lack of transparency, that it's a crowded market, there's a lot of buying and selling, and of course these things always shake out for an abundance of reasons, but to the point of transparency, how big is solving transparency as relates to either moving the market, moving dollars, or actually getting other industries to participate?
That's an interesting topic, because I think when you're talking about data, there's nothing more transparent than saying here's a raw data feed, whether you want visits or you want audience segments, here they are. Now you can use that however you want them. You can model that against other data you have to say, was this really accurate or not? And to be honest with you, we're seeing a lot of that in the space, people getting the data to model and see if it is accurate. There's a lot of transparency when you talk about data. There's a lot of black box when you talk about targeting. And trust me, I'm going to reach a person when they walk in the door. That's where I think there's still black box. I also think, as I mentioned before, if you're talking about data and evolving use cases of the data sets, I still believe that what needs to happen is that there needs to be a certification or some sort of verification system in place that is able to take that data. If you think about, not ad fraud, viewability, moat, right? Viewability, it required somebody to come in and say, okay, these are the viewability standards that everybody should be following, and this is what that means. And then it kind of cracked the market open once standardization was in there. I think the same needs to happen for data. People need to understand what is available. Not all the data sets are created equally. Knowing that, how do you use each data set, and who's standing over that to say, yep, you're getting what you're paying for? I think that's critical.
I would say once on top, so I would agree, and to kind of piggyback on that, at least from what we see from a Unacast perspective on occasion, is less about this is more accurate or that's less accurate,
right.
More so this is how we see the universe,
right.
And perhaps score it in a different way, and you can inform and make decisions on your own. So I agree, you either do it from one of the players in this room, or there's a third party that does so. I have another question in case Auren, Rob, or you guys wanted to chime in.
Well, I think it is different between the use cases. So we don't play in like the ad targeting use case, but in the ad targeting use case, you want to reach everybody. And so you can't be that accurate because reach is really important. So you basically want to be like better than 10% accurate, but if you're more than 20% accurate, you can't reach everybody. And so so your goal is to be in that like sweet spot between 10 and 20% for ad targeting. Now that works really well for ad targeting. That performs extremely well if you're 15% accurate for ad targeting, but that wouldn't perform really well in other types of things. It's like, so for instance, that wouldn't perform well for self-driving cars. It wouldn't perform well for hedge funds. It wouldn't perform well for real estate. So that means you would need a different set. Like if you're doing ad targeting and you're selling hedge funds, you would need different sets for both. Right, and so you have to kind of understand the use cases that you'd want for these particular types of things. For a hedge fund, you'd want, let's say, you want a super accurate set on like 3% of the population, rather than like a less accurate set on 100% of the population.
Great. So something that whether you guys decide to share or not, but wanted to ask, what is it that I guess in this space that perhaps keeps you up at night in regards to moving your company forward, if you want to share that or not, just trying to have an open discussion. Are there certain topics or market trends, saturation, what are the things that may not be, that we should be thinking about in regards to companies that are participating or interested or bought into the location ecosystem?
So one thing for us is, whether it's Factual or GroundTruth or SafeGraph, all of us are custodians of very, very sensitive data at massive scale, right? So in the absence of any regulation, any kind of, even any kind of accreditation, like we have to effectively self-regulate and behave appropriately. So I'd say the thing that keeps Factual up the most at night is making sure that we are behaving in an appropriate way with all the data we have, whether we're using it for ad targeting or for some of our enterprise customers. But it's a hot topic right now for us. It's a hot topic in the industry as well. but we spend a lot of cycles thinking about that.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, this is the compliancy and the responsibility.
Yeah, it's
whether
not even
user
compliance, it's
opt-in.
more around like, we have a responsibility, like we're custodians of this data, we take that responsibility very seriously, and we're continuously questioning for a particular customer use case whether that's an appropriate use of the data we have and how comfortable we feel with that.
Yeah.
I think I beat the standardization horse a little bit, but I would say the other thing that keeps us up at night is definitely the noise in the market. I think you mentioned, Chris, there's a buzz right now around location, not just from local location experts, but some of the bigger companies are getting into it. When you look at Google and Facebook and Snap, everybody's trying to solve for this value of a visit for good reason. But I think we need to be careful about confusing the market and being very clear about the use cases. I think sometimes we like to speak kind of like we're speaking to each other. Yeah. Oh, mine's better than yours, and this is my methodology versus, and I think that just confuses people, and we don't really get to kind of, really push those use cases and the value of the data set up the market where it should be.
It's interesting you bring up Google and Facebook because I do believe when I look around this room, these are the companies and the individuals that are pushing the space forward, and there are going to be some clear-cut companies that shape and design how many markets are powered. Whether it doesn't matter who it is at this stage, or maybe it does, but Google and Facebook, at least from my perspective, they don't come up. Do they have a They don't seem to have a clear visit strategy. They don't come up in conversations. We don't lose a buy to them. So this is more of like, I guess, my own education, or maybe, again, on behalf of the audience, what are your thoughts specifically on those companies or those that have, obviously, we know there's been some acquisition interest with Snap and others, but specifically for the publishers that have ID, that have logging, do you understand what they're doing in the space or how they're thinking about location or physical world behavior beyond the fact that they know who their user is?
Google is the gold standard. They are the best location company in the world by far. There's nobody even close. Their maps are so much better than anyone else's maps. They have maps not only in the US that are amazing, they have maps in Mongolia that are amazing. They're incredible. If you go to the upper northern parts of Norway, they have cars going there, like looking at street camera cars in the
Thomas,
upper.
is that true?
They're an incredible company, and then they're really good at taking that data and putting. So you need to have great maps if you're going to do location. Maps are actually way more important in location than pretty much anything else. So you need to have perfect polygons you need to understand where things are. You need to basically draw the shapes of everything. These need to be constantly being updated. And Google is better than anybody. And then the second thing is that you want to have a lot of data. And Google sees about 70% of phones. They see all of Android devices, and they see quite a bit of the iOS devices as well because of all their apps. And so they just have just a ton of data coming in, and so they're just really great at mapping phones to places. They're the gold standard that everybody else should be measuring. I haven't seen. We looked at everybody's APIs. Nobody so far has even comes close to Google.
I imagine, though, they probably can't get that in-store behavior. They can't get aisle 7 level targeting, or
they're getting it. They're starting to get it because they're getting data from beacons. They're starting to get other types of things. They now have indoor maps. They're the best indoor map maker now. So they literally map aisle by aisle of big stores now. So they are absolutely incredible. Companies like Facebook, Snap, etc., are Twitter, not there yet. They're not anywhere. They're not even in the same ballpark as Google yet.
Well, what we've seen, there seems to be also a lot from the big B2B players on the West Coast, like Cisco and Intel. A lot of them are actually approaching retailers and empowering them to basically understand full traffic. So offering a free service by basically lighting up the insides. They're most likely getting the data rights, which is pretty smart. There's an additional revenue stream, and obviously, I think a lot of you guys know that's where Unacast originated from, was the beacon ecosystem and trying to really understand in-store behavior. So that I think that's an interesting topic in regards to anyone else that's there or that has any success or traction beyond the maps. I agree with you with Google Maps. I can go on to the next Questionless Monica or Rob, do you have any? You're nodding your head. You're disagreeing with everything.
Facebook and Snap, increasingly Snap, but certainly Facebook, have huge advertising businesses built on location data. Facebook's one of our customers. We provide them with POI data. We have done for 6 years. They build a lot of what they do using our data, and it's a huge business for them.
Can you dig in a little bit to your relationship with Facebook and how that works? Your Facebook partnership? We
license our POI data to them, and they use that to build products and services in a very broad way across their business, as we do with Snap now. So don't underestimate how large their location-informed ad targeting business really is.
Sure.
Snap is certainly getting there, and there's others as well. And on Auren's point on Google, Google is the gold standard. We do look at our POI data against Google. We have third-party tests running against it, and we're pleased that we beat them in some categories now. We don't build maps, but on POI, we give them a good run for their money.
Great. Caitlin, or how many? I want to make sure we have at least 3 questions before we need to break. Is there we have time for a few questions? Okay. So I'd love to get a few questions rolled in. That was great. Thank you, guys. So who's going to be the brave and bold one, or at least ask? Thank you, Ben. What do you got?
It's linked to the...
Ben, do you want to just do first? I know you, but first, last name, company?
Yeah. All these guys know me. Ben Legg, CEO of AdParlor. We spend a lot of money on our clients' behalf on Facebook, Google, Twitter, Snapchat, Pinterest, etc. So actually a follow-on from the last question is we've, in the last year, trialed data from about 20 different sources, but almost all our advertisers are performance advertisers, so it really works to sell in. We haven't yet seen an improvement in ROI from any of those third-party data sources. So basically, we normally have access to our clients' CRM databases, we have access to Facebook's data, and the combination of those two seems pretty powerful. So, but I'm a believer. I believe Facebook doesn't know everything, and there's a whole load of other cool stuff we should be licensing that win. That improve ROI in a tangible way versus that.
Yeah.
Have any of you guys seen it, or
Yes.
love an answer now, or contact me after, because we believe I want to find the clever companies people in this room that can help us add value to what we do.
And Ben, just to make sure everyone could actually hear, just along lines of the question is your business is entrenched in performance, and in regards to location, you haven't seen, from your vantage, a significant lift or increase. Okay, I just wanted to make sure everyone heard that.
So one of the things I'll say, it's an area that GroundTruth is expanded in, because we found that a lot, where honestly with location, if you're talking about marketing, the creative, the way you use the targeting and how you message is so critical. All of those pieces need to work together. You can have the best targeting, the most precise, but if your creative is off, the whole thing falls apart. So what we've done is we've moved into a performance model. We offer something we call cost per visit, which basically takes all of the risk onto us to drive in those visits and the performance, and then leaves that pretty a pretty clean and safe buy for a marketer or an advertiser. We also hook that into CRM and do sales love studies as well. We had a really great case study with L'Occitane where we had an 8% visit lift. Obviously it's a product, and then a 10% sales lift from the offering. So would be happy to talk to you more about that.
That's good. Okay, a couple more questions we have time for before we, yes. Name and company, please.
Yes, Aaron Wiener with Narrative. Just curious, location signal on its own needs to be paired with something generally to be effective. So paired with POI data, whatever it might be. What do you guys see is for your companies the next pairing or pairings to help the utility of that data?
Good question.
We're all
Did everyone hear the question? So POI is obviously the core component as far as pairing with location data. The questions along the lines is what goes beyond POI? What's next beyond POI, or what's important beyond POI? Okay.
We're all in on location. We still think there's a long way to go on location, getting quality and accuracy better. Other data sets exist, but those can be operated outside of our environment. So location is key for us.
So we're a little bit different. I think we're actually breaking down the POI a little bit, because if anybody's looked at a map, POI is a 1 lat long point. So we actually are very interested in data sets that allow us to capture the full geo-boundary of a store, separate from a parking lot, separate from what we call a block or a retail block, right? if you're talking about proximity, knowing those differences are very important when you're trying to turn that into intent or audience or what have you. In terms of matching our location data set to other data sets, we think it's highly valuable. There's a big movement in the market, especially with marketers, to take these data sets, location data sets, and add that to their own CRM data, add it to other data in terms of Auto, Polk data set, Experian. And that just, honestly, it completes the picture of your consumer when you add this very powerful location consumer set to other data. So we try to make that as easy as possible. We can help join that, or we can give the data to an advertiser or partner to put in a DMP to do that.
These, I think the space-time data sets are becoming really interesting. So understanding things like the weather could be really helpful. Even just understanding just simple things like April this year had 5 weekends, April last year had 4 weekends. So if you're going to do an April to April comparison year over year, that's baked in. Understanding things like events. If you go to Yankee Stadium, you go for a baseball game, you can be there for the Beyonce concert, you could be there for the Monster Truck Rally, depending what you're there for. There's a lot that tells you a lot about that person. So I think we'll see a lot more space-time data get married with this location data. It seems like the obvious, easy one to marry.
Great. So I've been asked to wrap it up for our next discussion. So I just want to thank the three of you guys for taking time, flying, being here, sharing, caring. Thank you very much.